I'm Jeff Hunt. He's Brandon Wark. It's Free State, Colorado. Billy's out this week. Brandon sitting in today with me. Brandon Wark, Free State, Colorado. Go to freestatecolorado.com. Let's go back to the phone lines. Johnny in Denver. Good morning, Johnny. You're on with Jeff and Brandon.
Okay. This is really kind of weird because when I first got with the Republicans, I was in New York, and it was June, and we had just came back from Europe, and we went over to the Trump Tower, and my wife, she's from Europe, and this guy, she said, "Who's that tall guy with those tall guys around him coming down the escalator?" I said, "We're in the Trump Tower. It might be Donald Trump." And we were there when he announced his presidency by accident, or you could say, nothing's by accident. And
Yeah,
I said,
divine appointment.
I'm switching because I like this guy. And then I heard all the propaganda. Now, going forward, I decided to run for District 5, and Alex Valdez was my opponent, and he was a solar panel. He left the solar panel business to get into running as a Democrat. He started with $100,000. I started with $4,000, right? And then at the end of his term, because I went 2 times, and at the end of the term, he had put in a bill that every new building in Colorado, commercial building and probably non-commercial, will have to have solar panels on it, right?
Money.
Right. So he's going to leave, and now he has something set up for him. And I see this is how the Democrats run. Now we have a lady named Ashley Troxell, Troxell, who's now running District 5. She's part of running that. And now we have a plan that we're going to kick it off on January 17th. Now, she's at work now. I texted her. I said, man, you should get on this and tell that, we're getting organized, right? But when I first started, they just said, we'll help you with the paperwork, but you're on your own.
That's it. No, I mean, Johnny, that's the exact case that my wife had. And she ran out in Elbert County, and the party was divided and dealt with all this stuff. And I just said to her, we're sitting around the dinner table, and I just said, we got to do this on our own. We're going to do it on our own. Don't even bother. We got to do the fundraising. I'll design the website. We'll do the social media. We'll get the pictures. And not that that's bad that, Republicans have to step up to do all this stuff. But when you contrast it with a machine that's so big, so well funded, that any candidate on the Democrat Party just raises her little hand and says, I want to run for office, and then lo and behold, you've got legal, you've got grassroots outreach, ballot collection, fundraising operations that all show up to get you elected. It's automatically unfair for the Republicans. Johnny, let's go to Mark. Mark, your thoughts, or Brandon, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, no, Johnny, and you're very lucky to have Ashley. I know Ashley, she's awesome, and it's a new day in Denver for the Republican Party for sure. You're actually having some people, some good, competent people in leadership positions who are getting organized. I mean, Ashley has been doing amazing about organizing meetups in Denver and getting other Republicans together. I went to one before the election earlier this year. So no, it's exciting for sure. It's exciting. And sure, is a Republican going to be able to win in Denver? Probably not. But can you have an effect? Can you have an impact? And the answer is absolutely yes. You can have an impact. You can help moderate the Democrats, and we can move the needle a little bit in our direction. And ultimately, politics is a game we play in inches, not in yards.
Yep, that's right.
And when I threw my hat in the ring for the third time, I said, if anybody else wants to do this, go for it, and I'll support you. And it's almost like they say, hey, good luck, go for it again.
Johnny, you're great. Okay. We love you so much. Thank you. Have a very Merry Christmas. Thank you so much for the call. Brandon Wark, Free State, Colorado, live in studio, will be with us for the entirety of the show. He runs Free State, Colorado. He's a libertarian. promoting the liberty lifestyle here in this state. So we've got a lot to talk about. Now is time, though, for the news.
Blake Olson.
Blake Olson, news and comment.
Good Monday morning. 43 and sunny. Feels cooler out there in Denver. Expecting a high of 71 today.
71?
Yes, let's go. Come on.
Love some global warming.
You know we'll get all the snow in February
It always
and March.
tends to catch up. It does.
That's the good snow. See, I like that. I
That's
don't like
the
it.
wet snow, man. That's
Yeah,
I can't
I
get out
like
of the
that.
driveway snow.
No, but see, I when it's in December, then the roads are icier, and I like it when it snows and everything melts on the street. Don't you
Branches break and all
yes. Yeah, that's great. Clear, so you don't have to trim the trees. News sponsored by Pastor Camp Heating and Air Conditioning at 303-777-1234. To learn more about special savings opportunities on Lennox equipment. Our top story, the redactions in the first of the released Epstein files are being defended by Deputy DA Todd Blanche. Thomas Massey and Democrat Ro Khanna are considering contempt charges against AG Pam Bondi over the partial release of the files. Massey said Friday's release grossly fails to comply with both the spirit and the letter of the law that 47 signed last month. Mike Benz breaking this weekend that Epstein's corruption all started during Iran-Contra in the late 70s. He moved all the money around, and that is how he rose in corruption. Average gas prices in the U.S. are down a nickel a gallon from last week. AAA reports today's average gas price is $2.85 a gallon around the country. Cheapest gas in the area on the Front Range, the Costco in Westminster, $1.92 a gallon. Same as the Costco in Thornton, if you're looking. True Social is working with TAE Technologies. New York Times says it's a conflict of interest. New York Times is afraid that this is the answer and the game changer. That's what they're afraid of. They're the globalists who don't want us to win.
The New York Times is claiming that Truth Social is a conflict of interest?
With NAE, you've heard of this technology, right? The
No.
NAE, well, here, let's see. Here, let me play this for you.
Fusion energy really does change everything. Its primary fuel is deuterium from seawater. Its main output is helium. It is truly clean and readily available. It releases nearly 4 million times more energy than an equal amount of oil, gas, or coal, and about 4 times more than conventional fission reactors. Its byproducts and associated technologies in lasers, superconductors, advanced materials drive innovation across the entire economy.
So obviously that would help us.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Right, exactly.
So why does the New York Times hate it?
Because they're on the left. Because globalists run the New York Times, and they don't want us to be successful.
This drives me crazy, and it often gets me into the complaint that like the left is just so full of envy.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, like they're like,
right.
Jeff Bezos has a yacht. He's got a yacht. He's not allowed to have a yacht. I'm like, the dude figured out how to get toilet paper to my front door.
Right.
I don't care if he has a yacht. He has made my life so much better. Why do I care if he has a yacht? Give him 10 yachts. The dude makes, on a daily basis, things show up on my front porch that I didn't have to go to the store to get. Give the guy 10 yachts. Who cares?
Right.
What's
well,
with
like
this
the people
greed?
who run them don't have yachts.
Oh, yeah. Now, and all the Democrats taking the money so they can have their yacht.
Well,
Brandon,
absolutely.
what do you think of this?
Well, and I think it was Thomas Sowell who said, I don't understand why they call it greed when I want to keep my money, but it's not greed when the politicians want to take my money, right?
Yes.
And that's what it ultimately comes down to, is these people think they have a better vision than us, is what they really think. You know what I
Right.
mean? And you know, you don't need 2 bathrooms in your house. You don't need 2 TVs. You know, what about that poor guy on the street? You know, so it's totally misguided ideology that really has taken our country and our state in the wrong direction for sure. But it's an easy play because you're playing off that basic human emotion of envy, of greed, of saying, you know, I don't have enough and this guy has more. And ultimately, that's so much of what politics does, is robbing from Peter to pay Paul.
All sins, envy, greed, and jealousy, right? And then, so this is the part I didn't know. Interesting, the MIT professor who was murdered, okay, he was leading this technology.
Really?
I did not know that.
I knew he personally knew the guy that shot him, that weirdo from Portugal.
Wow.
They were actually classmates at one point. But.
So who is behind this? I mean, this guy evidently was right at the head of the technology. So it gets even creepier. And the lefties, like you guys said, I mean, it's just like the old story, you know, the American dad is with his son, looks up at the big house on the hill and go, one day, son, we're going to live in that house. And then a French dad and his French son are walking, and the French dad says, we're going to burn that thing down. I mean, what is America all about? And here's an opportunity to free us and help us become wealthier, and the New York Times fighting against it, and then you have this MIT professor who was murdered, curiously. All right, so we'll keep an eye on that. That is exciting when you look at the technology. Will it ever happen? I hope so. But the New York Times says conflict of interest with
New York Times is a conflict of interest.
Yeah, thank you.
Your entire life,
it's a conflict of
one
interest
giant
in humanity.
conflict of interest. Yeah,
exactly.
You're a big conflict of interest to humanity. The New York Times.
Absolutely. The U.S. Coast Guard is said to be in pursuit of a third vessel off the coast of Venezuela. The latest activity comes after Pentagon officials confirmed military forces interdicted a tanker carrying sanctioned oil in the Caribbean on Saturday. Once again, speaking of globalists and the left. Jags at the Broncos on Sunday at Mile High. Early in the third, Broncos down 17-10.
Handoff Harvey, and now a big run up the middle, breaking tackles, and R.J. Harvey on the move, down the sideline. Harvey diving for the pylon. Touchdown Broncos.
Such a beautiful run. He broke the tackles, took off, and then he dove to the pylon to get there. Man, that was an impressive run. Later in the third, tied at 17.
Lawrence will keep. Lawrence will walk in, and the Jaguars lead once more.
But Trevor Lawrence and the Jags come back. He keeps it into the end zone, and Jacksonville beats Denver and ends their 11-game win streak. Lawrence, 279 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, 1 on the ground. Bo Nix, 352 yards, a touchdown, interception, fumbled one with his running back. The Broncos still lead it in the AFC West at 12-3. Probably be a blessing in disguise. After the season is over, this may help them going into the playoffs. 34-20, the Jags win it, and at Kansas City on Christmas Day.
It's an overall team game, and you win them as a team and you lose them as a team. But I think individually, everybody will tell you that we all got to do better, and I think that's why we got a good football team. I'm going to do my best to fix all the mistakes I can on a quick turnaround and not let the same things get us, and it'll be done.
That's Bo Nix, and here's Sean Payton, the head coach.
Obviously, a disappointing loss. All the things that were important or are important to winning, we didn't do a good enough job with, and that starts with me.
Aurora police say a teen boy died Sunday after being fatally shot. Police arrived on the scene and found the victim lying in a driveway. Officials say he was pronounced dead on scene. If you have any information, please call Aurora Police. The Avalanche extended their win streak to 5 games with a 5-1 win over the Wild in Minnesota. Nathan McKinnon with 2 goals. Cale Makar and Brock Nelson each had a goal and 2 assists. The Jazz at the Nuggets tonight in Lodo, tip-off 7 o'clock, and the Colts and Niners tonight on the Tube. Can Phillip Rivers win this evening? He's 0 for 1 so far, the grandfather. So a lot of people will be rooting for him. 39 in Castle Rock, 41 in Lakewood, 43 in Denver. You're waking up with Jeff and Billy, and Brandon is in for Billy today on Monday, a couple days before Christmas Eve coming up in just a couple of days. Blake Olson, News Talk 710 KNUS.
Unseasonably warm, dry weather will continue through another week and through this Christmas week here in Denver with much above average temperatures and likely dry conditions, although the high country by Christmas Day will be getting some chances of snow. The Front Range and Eastern Plains will stay dry. 60s and lower 70s today, mid to upper 30s tonight, mid to upper 60s tomorrow, mid to upper 60s for Wednesday, and into Thursday, a bit cooler for Friday and the weekend. Meteorologist Don Day in the 710 KNUS Weather Center.
Yeah, not in Colorado. It's 73 today. It's beginning to look a lot like July. Yeah, right. Thank you, Adam. Oh, Billy's out this week enjoying a much-deserved week off, as well as next week he'll be back in the new year. So, live in studio with me is Brandon Wark, Free State, Colorado, freestatecolorado.com, the Liberty Lifestyle, a libertarian. I'm a conservative. That is the discussion and the debate happening today. Feel free to join the conversation by giving us a call at 303-696-1971. Text us on the Dan Caplis Law text line at 720-819-5115. Both the Washington Post and New York Times over the weekend covering the Minnesota fraud. Prosecutors saying that this is now industrial scale fraud across so many sectors, not just Medicaid fraud, but you're dealing with feeding our future, which is feeding kids that didn't have any food, okay? Autism services, housing stabilization. It is essentially across any social welfare program safety net that Minnesota had set up. Prosecutors saying industrial scale fraud to the point where half of $18 billion that was spent on Medicaid may be fraudulent. Half. Now, Brandon, you're a libertarian. This isn't shocking to you, right?
Oh, totally. Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's probably, when you really think of the whole country, it's probably even worse than most people think, because you have these unaccountable government organizations or organizations that receive money from the government, and there's no follow through, no follow up. You talked earlier about the homelessness in Denver and some of these NGOs, these nonprofits that just get this money. It's a black hole. Nobody knows where it goes. It's unaccounted for. And, so many of these people working in these nonprofits are Democratic donors or donors to political campaigns, and they're very politically involved. So there's a big system at play in terms of a lot of taxpayer money just disappearing into these black holes. And we're seeing it all over. We're seeing it even here in Colorado. There was that New York Post article that just came out where 221 dead people received federal housing assistance. And, I got to give credit to the Trump administration. We saw this with the SNAP benefits and others, and Medicaid specifically, where they're coming into the states, and Colorado included, and saying, hey, listen, you got to clean this up. You got to make sure these people are eligible. You got to tighten up because this fraud is unacceptable.
Yeah. Brandon Wark, Free State, Colorado. So I want people to understand the system. You mentioned it there, okay? So a nonprofit entity gets donors that give money to it, right? those donors will oftentimes give to the campaigns, or sometimes even the nonprofits will try to help a candidate without necessarily helping a candidate. There's some restrictions there, but they look to get around it. Okay, so let's say you're a homeless organization, an NGO in the city of Denver, and you know there's a lot of money if Democrats get elected, because Democrats are going to take tax dollars and funnel them through to your organization. So your donors, your board member, in fact, you yourself may give to these candidates to get them elected, knowing that there's quite a pretty check on the other end of this. You just need to get them through. Then they fund your entity. And are they really going to see if you're solving anything? Not really. You see this with homelessness. Homelessness has gotten worse. We've spent hundreds of millions of dollars in the city of Denver. I want to go back to John Hickenlooper saying that within a decade of 2006, he was going to solve homelessness in Colorado. It's now worse now than it's ever been.
The homelessness is worse. The crime is worse. It's bad. But a lot of people are making a lot of money, and that's ultimately what it comes down to. Some of these people who run these organizations, I mean, you're getting paid a six-figure salary to solve these problems. What's the incentive to really solve them? You solve the problem and that money dries up, So you got to think of it that way. Incentives matter in politics and economics and just the system we live in. So it's not too surprising that some of this money just disappears and ends up in wrong places. I mean, we did see that too with Proposition LL and MM that just passed here in Colorado this last November, right? So this organization that is getting money from our state government, our taxpayer money, for this purpose of feeding kids, they're part of this whole system in which they're feeding these hungry kids. They get money from the taxpayers, and then they end up spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on the issue committee to get voters to increase taxes so that their organization can get even more money. I mean, I think that should be illegal. The fact that they're using taxpayer money, I mean, money's fungible, right? So sure, you could say, yeah, okay, they only got $2 million from the state government. Sure, they spent $500,000 on this issue committee, on this ballot measure to try and get people to raise their taxes. So, you're not necessarily proving that the money came from taxpayers, but ultimately this is a taxpayer-funded organization. We have many of them in Colorado. Then they play politics. We're seeing these issues all across the state. We see it in Jefferson County, we see it in Adams County, and we definitely see it in Denver. Where there's money, people are going to do things to get that money, and sometimes it's unscrupulous, and that's just the way it works. And so there's a huge problem here. We're just scratching the surface, I think, ultimately, Jeff.
But Brandon Work, if you seek to cut any of these dollars, you're a terrible human being, where children are going to starve in the streets, that there's going to be no housing, there's going to be no health care. But for the government, we will all die. Brandon Work.
Yeah, that's the system they're creating. It's a system of dependency, and it's a system that will it's a cycle, right? You get people to rely on the government for their health care, for their food, for their housing, and then, of course, nobody can give that up at any point because they need that. No, they can't survive otherwise. You're creating an unstable system. You're creating a fragile system that's ultimately going to collapse. And we see this in all the communist and socialist countries that have ever existed. It doesn't last forever, folks. As Margaret Thatcher said, eventually run out of other people's money. So it's going to happen sooner or later. The best thing we can do is be these vigilant guardians of our taxpayer money. We have to hold politicians accountable. We have to track where every dollar goes and ensure that it's being spent properly and ultimately reduce taxes, because as we know, Jeff, the people are fed and people are housed because of the free market, because of private businesses coming together to meet the needs of people in the community. And ultimately, that's what's going to improve our society, make us a free state, and increase the lifestyle and the quality of life for everybody here in Colorado. So, they're going to give you that sob story. They're going to play off emotion, play off envy, play off greed, and make you feel sad that these poor kids aren't getting their food. But ultimately, we know that there's a better system out there, and it's called the free market.
But I think what's critical to especially try to explain to voters here in Colorado, because they're the ones making the decisions, because I talk to them on the street, and I have this little 6 commandments of wokeness I walk around with and do talks with. And the bottom one, I think, is the most important one, is the one that explains their worldview better than everything else. Kindness is everything, which in itself is, you're sitting there like, what? Like, no, it doesn't make any sense. Like, kindness is everything. But it's their primary motivation, right? They're moms in Highlands Ranch, their dads in Boulder, and they look at people that don't have what they have, and they go, I must do something about it. Let's create a government program. Because in their mind, the only thing that can solve that is a government program. And I feel like you have to explain to them that it never actually solves anything. But they never get to that second level of logic. They look at Proposition LL and MM and go, hungry kids got food from the government.
The biggest problem in democracy is that you can have 51% of the population robbed from the other 49%. Correct. And ultimately, that's the challenge that we face. And yeah, it's easy to make those arguments to say, hey, it's only 25 cents from everybody's, receipt when you go pay sales tax on your food or on your goods that you're buying at Target. But ultimately, it keeps adding up. It's only another $2 on your vehicle registration. 10 years later, it's 90 times what your actual vehicle registration costs is all the fees and all the little things they add on over time. So ultimately, that is a challenge, Jeff. How did the people understand that this is a losing game? It's a system in which it's rigged against us, but it's rigged by the politicians and by the government to take away our money. And it's a nickel at a time, a dime at a time, a quarter at a time, but we're still losing. And the ultimate message that needs to come out to the voters of Colorado is you deserve to keep the money you earn. You deserve to keep your whole paycheck. And these greedy politicians who are trying to take it from you are wrong. And even though their motivations may seem right, we need to wise up.
But I find this disconnect fascinating in the sense that, like, for instance, we just went through a government shutdown, right? Republicans, Democrats couldn't even agree to pay the air traffic controllers their salary. And yet we as a society, who should handle our health care? Those guys. It's fascinating to me that we as a population are like, the dumbest among us should make decisions on the things most critical to our lives. We are now a people in Colorado that are dependent upon the government, not just for our safety and our roads, which I'm okay, because I'm not a libertarian, I'm a conservative. I think there's some role for government. But when you're dependent upon government for your health care, when you're dependent upon government for your education, for your housing, for your paycheck, for your food in Colorado, at what point do you go, we are not free, we're dependent, we're wildly dependent and not a free people. But that, when I go to these No Kings rallies, that's not breaking through. In fact, it's the notion of, who really cares are the Democrats, because they have a plan. They'll go on healthcare. Well, what's your plan? I get these text messages all the time. In fact, Suzanne, she's texting in. Suzanne texts me and goes, what's your plan for healthcare? What's your plan? And I go, to not have the government in it. It's like, what's your plan to build a pencil? I don't know. I'm going to let the free market figure that out. It's not my job to build a pencil. I appreciate that it's 20 cents, but it's not the government's job to figure this out. But you can't approach a Democrat voter with this. They are so dependent upon government that if you don't have a government plan for health care, you are not a compassionate person, Brandon Work.
Well, and I think it shows a few things there, Jeff. It shows the failure of the government school system, right? Because they've trained kids in this dependency mindset for so long, right? Like you said, there's the famous essay, I Pencil, showing how many different individuals that no one person knows how to make a pencil. But you have this company over here and these individuals, these entrepreneurs who can make the lead for the pencil, and then people over here can make the eraser. And it all comes together in the beauty of the market. And we can ultimately solve our problems that way through this division of labor and through this great, beautiful system that we have in our country that is slowly going away because people are being lied to. They're being lied to in their schools. They're being lied to by the media that there's only one person or one people that are going to, there's one group out there that's going to help you. And that's either the Democrats, it's going to be our state government, the federal government. But that shutdown just exposed how fragile this system is, right? You have a couple weeks, you have a couple months. We were probably days away from riots and mass looting. That was the word on social media, at least. You cut off, you think of how many people are dependent on food stamps, on this housing, on this. What happens when that gets shut off? Yeah. Eventually it will. And we've seen it in third world countries.
Right.
That's the failure of the education system. They haven't shown the failures of communism in the Soviet Union. Why, when that Berlin Wall came down, were people rushing over to get to the capitalist side? Why are people risking their lives to make a little banana boat and come over here from Cuba? Because what we have works and it provides a better quality of life and gives those people the opportunity to go down there on a work day and complain for hours at a time with a sign in their hands and Starbucks in their Starbucks gift card in their wallet and an iPhone and all the things that capitalism has provided them. But it's ultimately that failure of education. And then, of course, just playing off that human emotion and human thought of, we got to help other people. And it's weaponized compassion. I don't know what else to call it.
Brandon Work, Free State, Colorado, sitting in for Bill Thorpe today. Text message 2983. Look, government programs have fixed things. Look at vaccinations. I'd rather have single payer than profit-motivated insurance companies. What's your response, Mr. Wark?
It's not going to work. It's not going to work. I mean, you give the government control of something, of course it's going to be ripe for abuse, for fraud, for people using the system to their own advantage, right? You got to understand what politics actually is. Politics is a system in which you're stealing from somebody to give that money to somebody else that you like, right? Here's the non-preferred group, the billionaires, the wealthy people out there, the small business owners, and we're going to take that money and I'm going to give it to my voters over here. The reality of what politics is it's a zero-sum game. You're stealing from somebody to provide from others. The market and the way economics actually works is it's a game where everybody can win, right? You're only engaging in that mutual transaction if you're going to benefit from it. Somebody's going to sell you something because they value the money more than what they're selling, and you value what they're selling more than the money you have. And that's a win-win scenario. Politics doesn't work that way. Profit is nothing wrong with that. The idea that of what profit is actually rewarding people in the market, in the community who are meeting the needs of other people in society. And if you do it well, you're going to make a lot of profit, and there's nothing wrong with that.
With regards to healthcare, though, I often see that it's lack of transparency. It's lack of free market systems that are contributing to the problems. So the government is the problem because we have all had this. Like my wife had an MRI recently where like the amount that was billed to the insurance was way more expensive than what she could have paid out of free market. So we've taken that system out. The healthcare system is non-transparent on purpose. You're all going to pay more. I think there's a Wall Street Journal article. We're now near $30,000 a year on healthcare costs. The average consumer in Colorado or in America, because you don't know where the money's going. You don't know how it's spent. It's a lack of free market principles that are driving up the cost. Your response, sir?
Oh, 100%. And like we talked about in the last hour, I mean, who's writing this legislation, right? The insurance companies are working in collusion with politicians to write policy, right? It's all these organizations coming together behind the scenes to say, okay, what can we do to maximize our profit? So there's no way to separate profit from anything in our society. And if you think the government's going to have this altruistic motivation where they're not worried about who's going to make money, well, those politicians, I can tell you, are worried about, or not maybe worried, but concerned about how much money they're going to get, how much their retirement's going to be, and all their little special interest buddies who are going to help them write this legislation are going to benefit from it, ultimately, and that's what it comes down to. So you got to understand incentives matter. The system's built in a certain way, and we have to understand that politics is not going to solve our problems. It's creating the problems that we have.
Brendan Wark, Free State, Colorado. The other aspect that's missing when the government gets involved, and Thomas Sowell in his book, Basic Economics, gets into this, is the importance of loss, of failure. In a free market system, things fail because they don't provide a quality service or they're too expensive, whatever it might be, but they fail. That makes the marketplace better in itself when the government funds things. To our point, the fraud that takes place out there, there's no incentive towards loss or failure, and it can just continue to get money in even when it doesn't provide a service. So, for instance, this industrial scale fraud, you had entire companies that were set up that weren't providing a single service, that were collecting money because the government was providing it. How in a free market system can you set up a service that doesn't provide anything? A company that provides no service and gets money. That's not going to happen. But in this free market or in this government-run system, that's how it works. All right, Brendan Wark, live in studio. Phone lines are hot. We're going to get to you all next. Let's talk Dan Caplis with Dan Caplis Law. Dan suggests you should choose a lawyer who shares your values because who you choose to represent you in an injury case says a lot about you to everybody involved in the case. Dan Caplis, the son of a police officer and a former seminarian who's dedicated the last 40 years of his life to helping people who've been hurt in serious motor vehicle crashes. Dan is believed to be the only lawyer in Colorado history to win 5 straight multi-million-dollar verdicts in Colorado crash cases. Dan is also believed to have won the largest truck crash verdict in Colorado state history. Dan Caplis is the official law firm partner of the Denver Nuggets and the Colorado Avalanche. Dan Caplis Law, a serious firm for serious cases. Dan accepts righteous injury cases on a percentage fee basis so that he can represent good people from all walks of life without regard to ability to pay. So if you need Dan's help, give him a call, 303-770-5551, 303-770-5551, or hit dancaplisLaw.com. That's Dan, CAPLIS Law.com. All right, we'll continue. You're listening to The Jeff and Bill Show, News Talk 710, KNUS. Welcome back to the Jeff and Bill Show. Billy out this week taking a much needed vacation. He's worked hard live in studio with me, Brandon Wark, Free State, Colorado. Go to freestatecolorado.com to check out the Liberty Lifestyle. freestatecolorado.com. Jam-packed phone lines. Well done, Brandon. You are a hot topic. We are talking the fraud that's taking place in Minnesota, fraud that's taking place here in Colorado, and the dependency that we have right now to seek the government as the only solution to our problems, and then recognizing it doesn't actually solve any of our problems. And then that got into healthcare as well. Let's get to Valerie in Arvada. Good morning, Valerie. You're on with Jeff and Brandon.
Good morning, Jeff and Brandon. Thank you for having me on. I heard you earlier, Jeff, talking about when a conservative candidate puts their hand up and says, I'm willing to do this incredibly difficult task of running, and nobody comes in to assist. And as someone who has worked on a campaign, who is very civically engaged while raising 3 children, it can be fatiguing. So what can we as citizens, just a base level item that all of us can be doing, because if the state party is not going to come in and save us, no one's coming to save us. What can we do to save ourselves?
Brandon, do you want to take a first stab at
Sure.
that?
I mean, hey, Val, really appreciate you calling in, but we have to be the leaders we're looking for, right? We have to be the people in our communities getting organized, talking to our neighbors. You know what I did last year trying to help Ryan Gonzalez? He won by 536 votes. We got libertarians not to run a candidate against him, and we actually got libertarians out door knocking for him. But, it was just an individual effort, and we can make those individual efforts in our own neighborhood. But Val, I think you hit an important point that we got to pull it in. We got to pull it into our neighborhoods, right? We got to pull it into our cities and our own communities and our school board races and really focus there, because we get so distracted with what's happening on the national and international level that it's easy to miss what's happening in our own communities. I've said this for a while. You show up at your city council meeting, you're going to be better informed than 80% of the people in your community about what's happening, and that's where it starts. Yeah.
I also think it's important to recognize Heidi Ganal is working very hard to try to replicate and build those systems. Heidi is, I think, the right person to do it. One, she's entrepreneurially minded, and she's seen what the Democrats have done, and she's trying to replicate that. Also, she has means. She built a very successful company. She's got a track record of doing it. She's not. I often think about this: those candidates that kind of arrive when it's time to run for office, then you never see them again once they lose. Heidi's not one of them. She's mission oriented, which means she's in it for the long haul. She's trying to turn Colorado. So she's trying to build some of those similar systems. But it's frustrating that it's like this, right? I think we would all, Valerie, we would all want to live in a world where the best in our neighborhood raises their hand and everybody goes, you know what? They're so good about shoveling the driveways for little old ladies that I would love to get them elected, and they would do. Instead, you have machines, and the Democrats have machines. They're well funded. They're getting total dopes put into office that are doing the bidding of these machines. And I think just kind of hoping and that the Republicans might be able to respond is not the right answer. I think you have to actually go out there and build a similar machine that can combat this. Otherwise, it's just not fair. Valerie, I appreciate the call. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
And thank you for doing the work you're doing. Valerie in Arvada, jump in. Her line's open real quick, 303-696-1971. All right, let's go to Mary in Wyoming. Good morning, Mary. You're on with Jeff and Brandon Work.
Hey, good morning, and I'm enjoying the show. But what you keep emphasizing free market, and I guess one of the things that I want to interject is that the baby boomers article in the Daily Mail today, and it talks about 1/3 of baby boomers are now almost multimillionaires. That they're the richest, in this country. The reason I'm bringing that up is that I remember after World War II, for your guest, I'm 80 and I'm black, and I've lived a lot of history. And so what I'm going on is history. Many of those military came out, they got the GI Bill, they got a free education and free homes. Not free, but you know what I mean. A mortgage, they're buying homes, starter homes for $25,000, et cetera. Now these homes are selling in the six-figure range. And that's giving them the wealth. That's your free market. But can it implode? and you continue to do that. I don't see anyone willing to not sell their home for the maximum amount. Yeah. And yet they didn't do that.
Yeah. Brandon, you want to respond to Mary?
Well, sure, Mary, and I really appreciate the call, but I think that that isn't the free market, right? I mean, the GI Bill and taxpayer-subsidized homes, taxpayer-subsidized healthcare, whatever it is, taxpayer-subsidized education, that's not the free market. And, in economics, we talk a lot about this costs of the seen and the unseen. So, sure, those are things that we see. We see where that money's going. We see how that money's spent. But if that money would have stayed in the pockets of the taxpayers, if that money would not have been printed by our Federal Reserve inflating the currency, devaluing every dollar that we save, then our society would be a lot better off, I think, ultimately. And that's the proof of American history, ultimately. The reason why we are successful and as wealthy as we are as a country is because we had a free market for so long. And it's freer than most, don't get me wrong. We're still in a better position than 90% of the world, I would say. But ultimately, we have to recognize and realize that the money that we earn belongs to us. We spend it in our communities. We're going to improve the quality of the life in our communities if we do that. And ultimately, we have to say no more money for the government, no more money being spent on these programs, whether it's because of the fraud, the waste, or just the abuse of taxpayer dollars.
Hey, he just missed my whole point. I'm saying these people who are wealthy right now through their 401s and et cetera got their start through the GI Bill at the beginning. They got that lift up. That's how we, Black people who did not have property when we came off the slave things, government housing. And we were locked in those ghettos for years. I remember because my dad had served in the Army, he had the GI Bill. That's when we got out of the projects and got the handout that we could, when you say handout, when we got the uplift to be able to get into a house and instead of government housing. So that, and then my family did well because both my parents worked. My dad at Pan Am, my mom at Boeing. So we were fortunate. We were blue collar. I grew up, on that.
Brandon,
so my point is that helped.
All right. Sure. So the argument being that the government can be an important foundation base to help
Not
launch
only
people.
Important foundation.
What?
This is why these people, the boomers, are wealthy.
Many
of them use that.
I think, Mary, I think some of them, but I mean, maybe, but not everybody's on the GI Bill.
Not everybody is gotten that benefits.
There was a large portion of the men in the 40s that were military because of World War II.
Sure.
And this is the generation I'm talking about.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yes, so that was a big.
But Mary,
Mary,
don't you think there's a difference between somebody that raises their hand and says, "I'm willing to go serve my country and lay down my life," and the government just handing subsidized housing to people?
Oh, definitely. I'm not. See, no, I'm talking about the free market. Where I think I'm missing. I'm not saying what I see. I'm saying you're selling houses now, starter houses for $600,000, and that's why you have a young generation really frustrated because they can't get ahead. They can't even get a starter home.
All right, Mary, it's working hard to build a house. Build a house in Colorado, right? Like the restrictions aren't there the way they were in the 1950s and 60s, and you can blame Democrats for that. All right, I mean, look, they can't even build a train. They get $1 billion, can't build a track to put a train on. All right, we've got a lot. Phone calls jam-packed. Well done, Brandon Work. We'll continue. You're listening to the Jeff and Bill Show, News Talk 710 KNUS. Welcome back to the Jeff and Bill Show. Billy, let's put up Michael. Michael, Denver, good morning. You're on with Jeff and Brandon Work. Brandon's sitting in for Billy. Good morning.
Morning, Jeff. Great to listen in and hear Brandon on the radio. One thing I wanted to say real quick is that last caller referenced the GI Bill and the benefits it gave to a lot of soldiers. You can't deny that a lot of soldiers received a lot of benefits from the government. But my question is, why did the economic boom of the 50s happen in the 50s and not in 1945? Because if the people that were coming back from Europe, all these war heroes, were bringing all this money back into our economy, you would think it would have been an instant success. But it took years and years and years for the U.S. economy to slog out of the Great Depression. So I don't necessarily think that's the magic straw for a lot of people. But you can't deny necessarily, like Brandon said, that that there weren't some people who did benefit from government benefits like the GI Bill. My question to you guys is, what is the great hope that we can give to people in 2026, the election? We're seeing a lot of negative press regarding Jenna Griswold, what she's done. And don't get me wrong, she's done a lot of horrible things. I'm a part of the LP, and we actually sued Jenna Griswold because of what she did in 2024 and all the horrific stuff that she...
Michael, we're up against the break here, so I'm going to give Brandon a quick response. Go ahead, Brandon. We got about 30 seconds.
No, Michael, 100%. Appreciate you calling in, but we got to give people that vision, that hope, that kind of message, right? And I think it's that things can be better. Your life can be better. You can have a wealthy lifestyle. We can improve the quality of your life. We can have better schools. We can have cheaper health care. We can have affordable housing. But we're going to do it through the free market. We're going to get the government out of the way. We're going to give people the opportunity to make their life how they want it. And ultimately, that's got to be a hopeful vision. It can't just be about negative all the time, like you said. You know, we're always talking about how bad the other side is, that's for sure. And they are bad, like you said. But ultimately, there's got to be something to vote for, not just vote against.
Well, and I think you need to help people understand that no matter where progressives get control, like the more progressive it gets, the crazier lib it gets, the more expensive it gets, and the worse the service is. I mean, it's crime ridden, it's poverty ridden, it's drug addicted ridden, and you have no money because they took all of it in taxes.
There's a reason.
I mean, that's everywhere. That's San Francisco, Seattle, Denver.
There's a reason they're moving here, right? There's a reason people are fleeing California. We're going to see them flee New York. And hey, if you believe in freedom, if you believe in liberty, if you believe in free markets, then please leave New York, before the socialists take over, and come to Colorado. But make sure that we embrace the Colorado values of frontier individualism, free markets, and personal responsibility.
All right. That's Brandon Work. He's live in studio. We're going to continue. Join the conversation. We got one open line, 303-696-1971. Alicia, Marie, you guys are going to be up next. You're listening to the Jeff and Bill Show, News Talk 710, KNUS.